my heart to sing, taking the darkness inside, revealing your light, restoring hope.
Good day. Thank you so much for joining us. You caught me texting. I'm texting out messages while I'm coming on air. It is the world we live in, right? We're always multitasking and handling several things at once, which could be why we're losing our liberties, because we're so busy doing other things. We're not paying attention, and there's so much coming at us that we've got to be handling and answering so many different things that we've lost sight of the big things, of the really important things, and that would be our child's education, our family, our liberties, our freedoms. It is under attack. My guest, I am so thankful, joining me for part 2, The Cult of the Common Core. If you're watching online, The Cult of the Common Core, Brad McQueen will be my guest. For those of you who are listening on radio across America, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. What we do is trying to give you help when the headlines hit home. We give you truth for our time. And as so many liberties are being attacked and taken, let me just tell you, recently I was traveling on the bus, Family Research Council, the Family Leader, and National Organization of Marriage, touring the Midwest, helping rally voters to understand they're losing liberties. Their votes are so important, and they must vote their values and understand they're losing liberties. While we were on that bus, came the headline that a mayor in Texas, Houston, Texas, had subpoenaed messages from pastors. First off, the separation of church and state you've heard about is not in the Constitution. The only reason they can get by with this is a bill that came out of Texas, ironically, the Senator Johnson, who was annoyed that churches had spoken out against him, tacked something on another bill. It was an amendment, not even a large amendment, and it is what has now become this IRS's arm to unlawfully, unconstitutionally try and hold a limit on pastors and their 501c3s. It is not constitutional. The First Amendment secures their liberties and their freedoms, and that would be what they preach on Sunday as well as what they want to do with on Monday, whether it's talk about a pastor, talk about a vote, talk about an endorsement, or even with their money. But right now we're all playing by those rules. We're obeying those 501c rules of the law, of the money and the political stance. But this mayor has overstepped that. She's now asking for a copy of their sermons, the outline. She's asking if they're talking about her. She's asking if they're talking about homosexuality, which she is. And apparently the problem came, according to our guest, Michael Damascus, when she helped usher through some protection for anyone on gender confusion. They could use any restroom they liked. Understand that, as Michael told us, a 40-year-old man, a 50-year-old man could go into a girl's restroom, women's restroom, and be there for whatever reason, watching young girls where they would be susceptible as a victim. It just doesn't make sense. It goes against our grain. You can see the problems with it if you'll allow yourself to see past the political correctness of it. You'll see the ineptness of the policy. I want to get back to my guest. Forgive me, Brad Queen, for getting off on that tangent, but losing our liberties is exactly what we're talking about in the cult of the Common Core, because the freedoms of each school district will no longer be. They'll be answering to a federal government, to a mandate out of a centralized location. No longer will they have local control. No longer will they be able to say, we're not going to teach that here. We'd like to teach it in this manner. Brad McQueen was a teacher. He is a teacher for 11 years, and he's been other things besides that, I think is what I was going to say, which I think gives him the ability, the beauty to see the problems with this. Brad McQueen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And folks can find you on Facebook, The Cult of the Common Core. They can also find the book online. You and I were talking. Teachers are having a hard time speaking out on this, though they don't like it. Some of the teachers' unions are actually now speaking out on this. But many teachers face repercussions as those who push Common Core work to destroy the dissenters.
Exactly. In the school system, if you want to cheerlead for Common Core, the departments of education will give you the pom-poms to cheerlead for it. In fact, they're using Teachers of the Year to push Common Core. A lot of times when you see teachers on television ads or writing. Sometimes, many times, when they're writing op-eds, they'll say Teacher of the Year, Iowa Teacher of the Year, Arizona Teacher of the Year at the bottom, as if it gives them more weight. And each state chooses their own Teacher of the Year. What they never disclose is the entire Teacher of the Year program is run and administered by a Common Core organization called the Council of Chief State School Officers. It holds the copyright to the Common Core standards. So, of course, they're going to choose people that are for the Common Core, and they even brag about how on the Achieve website, it's another Common Core group, how they use Teachers of the Year to push the Common Core message. So if you're for Common Core, you can say anything you want. Now, to be fair to teachers, many of them are like parents across the country. Many of them are parents across the country. Teachers are. A lot of them don't see the full picture of Common Core. A lot of them still think it's just learning standards that are just being introduced into the schools. But as they have more experience with it, I think they're getting that not only are they learning standards, they're NSA-like data suctioning systems being put in our schools. They're testing, nationalized testing groups being formed. There's also the connection between the kids' data and their testing data. It directly connects to the teacher. And some people might say, well, that's a good idea because we can keep teachers accountable. And that's sort of the cover they use with Common Core, that's what they use it for. And but what that connection between the kids' test results and what they're doing in the class and how they connect to the teacher, that part of Common Core is the compliance method for Common Core. They make sure if a kid sort of doesn't do well on a certain section of the test related to First Amendment rights, for instance, like you were talking about, maybe we should go back. If they don't give the right answers, maybe we need to go back into that kid's data stream and look online at the teacher's lesson plans, which are now all online. Teachers' grades are all online. Teachers' evaluations are all online. Let's go see where that teacher, what they were teaching and when they taught it. So it's a compliance method. And also the kids' information and testing results are directly tied to teacher pay and teacher evaluations now. That's why you're hearing the teachers' unions coming out against it in some areas, because you go after teachers' pay, you go after the union dues. The teachers' unions, the NEAs and the AFTs of the world, they were strongly for Common Core back in 2010 when it was implemented, and they were okay having our kids be the victim of Common Core, these Common Core predators. But when it started hurting their bottom line, now they're against it. I mean, I'm grateful that they're joining the chorus and shouting to get rid of this Common Core thing. But you've got to be clear that that's the component they're really after.
And now they see it coming after their liberty as well, on how they teach, how they'll be able to implement a lesson. It's exactly what we're talking about with those pastors. Don't just think the government, the mayor will come after those folks. They'll be after you next if they're not stopped for this intrusion.
And the thing is, they usually go after people of faith first. A lot of times they're trying to pull in the faith-based schools now with Common Core, kind of like they did with the Catholic bishops with Obamacare. They got their support, and then they nailed them when they didn't want to hand out birth control. It's the same thing. They're trying to court the faith-based crowds to get them on board. If you go, because they're an existential threat to Common Core. They're teaching sort of principles and values that are grounded in something else other than conformity and control being given over to a earthly power, so to speak. So they're courting the faith-based, the Catholic schools, and a lot of Catholic schools are aligning up with the Common Core curriculum. I don't know about the databases yet, but Common Core, it affects public schools, charter schools, religious schools, and homeschoolers. It's going to definitely affect as
Absolutely.
Well. And homeschoolers are definitely the biggest threat to Common Core and progressives in general, because parents are taking control and they're exercising their right as parents and controlling their kids' education and imparting their values. That's a definite threat to progressives in Washington, D.C., in both the Republican and Democrat Party.
Absolutely. And you mentioned progressives, and let me just say it again. If you hear someone talk about being a progressive and they're running for office, understand progressive means it will be oppressive. Their views will oppress you because they're going to implement large governmental policies, and that will limit your individual liberties. When you hear someone talk about being a liberal, in most instances, that means your liberties will be attacked. We saw that in Iowa. When the liberals were elected, they took out smoking, made it illegal in public buildings and private businesses. Like it or not, market should determine that. The public should determine that, not your government.
With the progressives as well, it's in their name. They progressively are doing these things. They have an end game in mind, and they progressively, like the mayor in Houston. That happens, then another thing happens across the country, then another thing, till it becomes the norm, and then they reach a little further. Then they reach a little further. Education has was more locally controlled in the past, and slowly but surely, progressively, it has been centralized into Washington, D.C., with No Child Left Behind, was part of it under George Bush. And then Obama's administration with Common Core is just the final solution for our children's minds and their education in our country's exceptionalism.
And I want to talk about a couple things. You're right. Education used to be more local when we had, higher scores is what they used to tell us. And I would say we put people on the moon using flashcards and one-room schoolhouses. That local control creates competition. At the same time, I think you talk in your book, we hear so much about us failing compared to other countries. I think you mention the things that we're strong in. Let's see those other countries when they develop a Google, an internet, the creations, the innovations that still come out of America.
Exactly, and that's the thing that progressives don't need to. They aren't based in reason. They'll just keep saying the same thing over and over, even though it doesn't make sense, till you think you're crazy for applying reason to this. They always cite our kids as being less than other countries' kids, and they cite this PISA test, this PISA test. It's an acronym test. It's a Eurocentric test that is given every couple of years, and our kids aren't the top kids. Usually it's Finland and Singapore and Shanghai or something. And they always cite that as, well, our kids must be failing because these other kids are doing so well on these tests. Well, I always say, great, let them be the championship test takers in the world. Look at what our kids grow up to do. Our kids grow up to put a man on the moon. Our kids grow up to create a military that is the most advanced, technologically advanced military in the world that protects the world from tyrants time and time again, and tyranny that has its roots in those very same one-size-fits-all centrally controlled countries that are topping our kids on some little test.
And I had a CIA agent tell me one time, at least I'm told he was a CIA agent, that America is the one who creates. Other countries may conform or make the assembly line, make it better, cheaper, put it out in mass quantities better than we do. But America is the creation, the innovation, the good ideas. We've seen that. I also want to touch on, you mentioned in our part one, and for those of you who want to find the show in its entirety, we're so thankful for our American Family Radio listeners across the nation. But for those who want to find the archives of the show, Tamara Scott Live, you can go to Tamara Scott Live on YouTube, and you'll find the Brad McQueen shows. You can find them part one and part two. You talked about them changing history and that this will affect homeschoolers, private schoolers, Christian schoolers in time, and we already see that. David Coleman, the architect behind the Common Core, has gone to the College Board. And on this show, you can also find that archive with Larry Krieger and Jane Robbins from American Principles Project. We exposed the fact that the advanced placement U.S. history exam has been changed. The transparency has been diminished, and what they've done, what used to be a 5-page outline to the AP programs, the schools participating, is now well over 100-page document on what you must teach, and that you need to know nothing else besides what's in this document. And it's not so transparent anymore. America's triumphs are diminished. Our military triumphs are not touted. Any errors we've had, any issues we've overcome, slavery or anything else has been really overblown and overemphasized. We are no longer an exceptional nation into this teaching. And that is the Advanced Placement U.S. History exam. The Republican National Committee, I know, passed a resolution because I was able to draft it with the help of Jane Robbins. It passed unanimously at their Chicago meeting that we would ask legislators, congressional members, not to fund the College Board, not to fund the College Board until we get transparency back in this testing and accuracy back in the content being tested. So, Brad, you're absolutely right in what you're talking about. Coming forward, this will affect and impact homeschoolers, private schoolers, Christian schoolers, but they are working to change the history, the heritage, the legacy, the lineage we have in America.
Yeah, because if you can change that in one generation, you can change America. If you take out the exceptionalism, like in the AP guidelines, AP American History guidelines, you take out our American exceptionalism, what's left in those guidelines for what should be taught to basically some of our brightest kids take advanced placement classes so they can get college credit in high school for history. So what remains to be taught and what they're teaching is American oppressionism, victimization, social injustice, imperialism. It's quite disgusting, and they talk very little, if at all, about our great founding fathers and our great military leaders, or our military in general doesn't get much of a mention unless it's in a negative light. And so the homeschoolers and people that go to religious schools, if you want to get AP credit, you're going to have to pass that test that is based on that set of criteria.
Right.
And with David Cohen being head of the College Board, they've changed the SAT college entrance exam, which affects college entrance admissions as well. They've dumbed it down. They've aligned it with Common Core. So homeschoolers and others will be at a disadvantage if they don't align their instruction to the Common Core. And there's also another line of thought, and I wouldn't put it past these people, that with the chambers of commerce, they like to see our K through 12 educational system be used as a human resource development, so that they can sort of ask our school systems to create the type of workers they want. I could see a situation where you go to a job interview and it's mandatory that you have attended a college and career ready program. That's code for Common Core. And if you're a homeschooler, you don't have that.
And we know that those programs don't work. The college and career doesn't necessarily work. James Milgram, who was on the committee with the Common Core, the only mathematician on the committee, Professor Emeritus from Stanford, I believe, refused to sign off on it when he saw how poor the math standards were, how lacking it would be. They would not be STEM ready. So though your governors and your promotional educational Department of Education materials may promote STEM or college career and ready, because they say it in no way indicates that they will actually do it.
No. And it doesn't prepare them for college or career. And even Jason Zimba, one of the other architects of Common Core, specifically says that if you want to go on to a more advanced engineering, math, technology sort of career, Common Core is not going to prepare you for that. You need to do more than is prescribed. So it's a dumbed down version where everyone gets a trophy, rather than lifting up our system to meet to raise kids' expectations for their academic achievement. We've dumbed it down and lowered the bar so that everyone can jump over it.
And I want to touch on one more thing. I looked it up while we were talking. Carolyn McClarty, the National Committee woman out of Oklahoma, another wonderful asset to the Republican National Committee. She chairs the Resolution Committee, put this out yesterday, $800 million annual budget. $800 million annual budget, $1 million of that goes towards lobbying. This is your College Board, by the way. And they receive $79 million in direct funding from the federal government. So that's your tax dollars working against you, working against the history that so many of our ancestors have secured through their blood, sweat, and tears as veterans. And we just can't let their their sacrifice go down in vain because someone wants to rewrite who we are and what we are in this country. I'm talking with Brad McQueen. I'm holding up the book for those of you who are watching live online. We do the show on Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Central, on Webcast One Live. Webcast One Live, if you want to join us any week, we invite you to do so. You can find the archives on Tamara Scott Live, and you can also get a hold of us, Tamara Scott, Truth for Our Time Facebook, Truth for Our Time Facebook, but you can get a hold of Brad McQueen on the Cult of Common Core on Facebook, the Cult of Common Core on Facebook. Brad, we're talking about the Common Core, and I need to thank as well Christians for America, Crave, Christians for America. We thank them for their sponsorship and making it possible for us to get this information to you so that you can make a difference and you can have control in your livelihood and your family. Brad, you in this book, The Cult of Common Core, again, thank you for making it so easily readable. You talk about what the cult saith, and then you give us deprogrammed rebuttal. Thank you so much for allowing us and giving us some ideas on how to handle and come back at some of these statements. I guess I want to come back to the teachers thing as well. In Iowa, we had a very expensive education bill go through a year or so ago, and it had mentoring teachers in it. The mentoring teacher program. And again, that comes back to the compliance. If teachers are not teaching to the Common Core, that mentoring teacher program, or as I think it was referred to in other countries in history, in America near World War II, master teachers, it is a compliance mechanism. We're losing the ability. We're losing the freedom, the local control in our own districts. Have you heard much about opting out of the testing?
I've heard some of it. I know Janet Wilson has done a lot with the National Opt-Out campaign, informing people about how to opt out. I think the thing is, and that's growing. But the thing is, if you don't know what's happening in your school, then you can't opt out. Or if you don't know if you have the right to opt out, then you can't opt out. So we still need to get that information out about what's going on in the schools as far as the Common Core, definitely. Because their goal is to, a lot of teachers are leaving the profession. Veteran teachers are leaving. They're realizing this is the final program. This isn't this isn't just another program coming along. This is the one that's sticking. And a lot of veteran teachers are leaving. A lot of teachers that have been in the profession just for several years are looking for a way out. This isn't what they signed up for. They signed up to influence lives and, communicate their passion for education and knowledge, whereas Common Core sees that as a threat. They want education implementers. You implement what is being given to you. And we haven't touched on this, but I've done a lot of research and I've written the book, but I also worked on the Common Core test.
That's right. And I did want to bring that out. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I worked on the Common Core test. Arizona was in the PARC test. There's Smarter Balance, which I was part of, and PARC, it's an acronym, which Arizona is a part of. And I've worked on our state test, our statewide assessment for the past 5 years, so I know something about standards and creating tests. So they asked me to be one of 5 people from Arizona to go work on the PARC test. I worked on writing rubrics. I also worked on the reading and writing for 5th grade, looking at the test items. And I'm using work in quotes lightly. We were asked for input, but our input, we were more window dressing for this process, just like Dr. Milgram was used as window dressing, just like Dr. Sandra Stotsky was used as window dressing when they were developing the standards. They want to check the box that teachers and experts were involved in the test creation process and the standard creation process when we're not. In fact, when I went for the first time to go work on these standards, I had no opinion about Common Core either way. I just knew it was coming. I just figured it was a new set of standards, and I just wanted to see what it was going to look like on a test. Maybe I might have to adjust my teaching. I was more curious, and a lot of teachers out there are waiting for the test to come out to see how it impacts them in the classroom.
Brad, thank you so much for joining us today. We are already out of time once again, but you can find us on the Tamara Scott Live YouTube. Brad McQueen, The Cult of Common Core. Please check it out online. Be encouraged. Never be complacent.